Okay, so I'm going to now move in my role as acting subcommittee chair, even though I don't support one of them, but I'm going to move that the remaining two recommendations be adopted by the committee at large. The first one is on video surveillance. The recommendation is that all licensing authorities should require that all areas where waste is stored, processed, handled, and properly disposed of be covered by video surveillance. And the second recommendation is number 4, and it is that all licensing authorities should consider establishing standards for security personnel for cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution.
Okay, I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second it, Member Nikita. And I'll also just point out for number 4, security personnel, this is a should consider. And our discussion in the subcommittee really revolved around the additional cost and the statements by a lot of cultivators and security professionals and law enforcement in the room who were concerned about security issues, but also concerned about the cost for just a blanket security requirement. So this is punting it to the agency for them to consider what's appropriate, if anything.
Perfect. All right, thank you. Any comments, members?
I would have a really hard time supporting either of these. Currently, cultivators aren't held to either of these standards, and I cannot possibly imagine having full-time security personnel at my homestead where my cannabis is cultivated, where it's been cultivated for a dozen years or more, and it would be completely unaffordable for the vast majority of rural operators, especially cultivators.
Any others? Okay, let's go ahead and open this up for public comment, please.
Okay, so we're taking public comment on the acceptance of recommendation number 3 and 4. All right, please go ahead, Susan.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Susan Tibbin. With regards to recommendation 4, waste disposal, there's a fundamental problem here with the nomenclature. Cannabis waste management. I'm
sorry, we're on
4?
Enforcement number
What page is that?
3 and 4.
4.
This one right here?
Yeah.
Okay. Excuse me, my apologies. May we reset the clock, please?
Yes.
Recommendation 3, video surveillance. I want to echo the last speaker on the panel. As a rural, small farmer of many years, working with other people, doing similar kinds of activities, this is, it's onerous. It's sometimes impossible for many of us who are off the grid. It just seems punitive. It seems to assume criminality or danger. We use all parts of the plant. We compost, we burn appropriately with burn permits in season, and certainly video surveillance may be appropriate in some urban settings, but it is an undue burden for us in rural settings.
Thank you. All right, next up. I think maybe...
Me, Ralph Trueblood, WAM, and California Compassion Coalition. I just want to, Susan said it all. It's burdensome. It's unreasonable to have video surveillance and security personnel on a farm, a small farm especially. And the other aspect to this is the cost to the patients. There's a lot of the patients are going broke already with medical expenses. We're trying to serve people often who have very, very little money, and to add layer upon layer of expensive, exorbitantly expensive regulation is inhumane. Thank you.
Thank you. And since we're significantly over time at this point and have a lot of agenda items, if someone has said what you've already said, then please consider refraining, but go ahead.
Russ Gordon, California Growers Association. One of our members' top priorities throughout this entire regulatory process has been to ensure that folks who live in rural situations, relatively remote rural situations, or off-grid situations do have a way to comply that is not excessively onerous, and video surveillance has been one of the things that we felt very strongly about. So definitely strongly agree with committee member Navarro's stance on this position. The position so far in terms of cultivators has been to leave video surveillance and personnel requirements to local governments to decide, which enables a place like Humboldt County to have different regulations from somewhere like Oakland or LA, which may have different security requirements. Would also point out that the statutory goal of this committee is to ensure that there are not barriers that prevent the undue proliferation of the regulated marketplace, and there should be extreme caution taken before voting on any recommendation that actually substantially increases barriers for people to get into the regulated marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Max Michelose on behalf of Flocana want to add two observations in opposition to both proposals. Video surveillance, not just is it adding video requirements and on the waste areas for retailers and such, but by adding it to cultivators and manufacturers and others that do not currently have that requirement, they're required to actually install these systems in the first place, develop the backup stuff to be remotely accessible, and those may not be accessible in parts of California where there's not broadband access. So this may actually be an infeasible, industry-killing requirement to require cultivators to have video surveillance of their waste areas. On the security personnel standards, concur that it's overly burdensome. We are, however, on behalf of the Delivery Alliance, pleased to see the observation that extending the requirement to all licensees can increase costs for licensees who have premises that are not open to the public. In that vein, we'd support removing the security personnel requirement from delivery services that are not open to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next up.
Hello, it's Jim with the Emerald Cup, and in both of these situations, you're not taking events into account. With the Emerald Cup, most of our vendors, retailers, whatever you'd like to call them, are small farms. So this doesn't address the events at all with these two issues. So just want you to do that, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before making the decision to be a nursery, I was looking at security requirements. And as a cultivator at low resolution, which this requires high resolution, I spent approximately $10,000 for a point-to-point system that was just to a VCR. To add an upload capability to that situation is just an incredible expense, and I think that the local governments, if these are going to be imposed, would know the situation and the environment much better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chris Boyer, Iron Protection Group. We're a combat veteran-founded and operated company that specializes in security for the cannabis space. I wanted to echo what Mr. Nikita stated here a moment ago with regard to the recommendation number 4. This is just encouraging the respective licensing agencies to go ahead and take a look at their own respective policies when it comes to the security mandate. With regard to small cultivations, obviously that's a security program such as what we offer is largely unaffordable to the majority of cultivators. But for larger scale cultivators, this is where we start to have to look at risk versus reward. For criminal factors, the risk of arrest and robbing a dispensary in an urban area where police response times is significantly faster is far higher than the risk faced in a rural area where criminals have the ability to operate knowing that law enforcement will take longer to arrive. And the reward of robbing a single dispensary is far lower than robbing a grower production which produces and supplies cannabis for dozens of dispensaries. So to an intelligent criminal with only modest resources, that's a pretty easy choice. Target production. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim Moreland, River Distributing. We strongly believe that we should have security personnel at distributor locations. We're carrying product and we have a lot of tax revenue. So as far as distribution is concerned, there should be some type of security service guarding those premises for probably most of the day. So definitely would advocate for that, and also cameras on waste destruction for distributors as well. In our facility, our destruction area has a camera, And we do that for a lot of different reasons, for insurance reasons and just to make sure there's no theft through the destruction process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Paul Hansberry, Lovingly and Legally. Tim here, he probably does need that. He's right, he's a large distributor. As a small home-based micro business, I'm not sure you want to see a video of my compost pile. As a, you know, or me burning it. I also, with the security guards, if I choose retail, I would be mostly delivering. But not just speaking for myself, speaking for other dispensaries that are in my part of the world, in northern Mendocino County, they haven't had security guards ever, and they have had a problem with security never. So let's leave it up to the local people to decide whether they should need to do that or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, how's it going? My name is Joshua Jenkins with Loyal Penguin Incorporated. I just want to draw attention to the security requirement of personnel at a distribution facility. This is a business-to-business solution, and placing security guards like it is at a retail storefront, right there on the front lines, this draws a lot of attention to what we're doing. You know, we're trying to keep a low profile, and we don't have a problem video recording our compost pile. You know, that's fine with me. But when it comes down to paying an actual individual to sit guard 24/7 or during business operating hours, that doesn't really work for a distributor because it draws attention from a security standpoint. So I would just request that that be taken into consideration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Virgil Grant, CMA. As far as security guard is concerned, I agree with, I think it was Avis that said in reference to letting the local municipalities deal with that. I've owned and operated within probably 20 years, and I've never had a security guard. I think it looks ugly to have a security guard standing outside with a gun. To me, that looks unsafe. That looks like a place I don't want to go in, not a place that I do want to go in. Just like having bars all around it. Doesn't look like a place I'd want to go to. And I think about the communities that I operate in. Those are the same communities that I live in. And I want my environments to look safe. Not just be safe, but look safe. So I think that if, you know, there was to be a security guard, he'd have a nice jacket with the gun tucked inside as if you were going in a Louis Vuitton store. But I wouldn't want to see one standing outside with a weapon.
Thank you. And this is going to be the last public comment on this agenda, this item.
And so also, again, we're a micro business here in Los Angeles, and as a retailer, our LA City required us to have security guards at our stores. Did not say armed or unarmed, but security. We chose to get an armed guard, and I could just tell you our cost of doing business went up by $12,000 a month for one guard, just from 8 to 10. So now if you require cultivators to have 24-hour armed guards, surveillance is one thing. I'm not going to argue with video, but to require them to have a manned security guard at cultivations, and you're going to drive up that cost possibly $20,000 more a month for them, they might not be able to even stay in business at that point. So, and then if they do, that cost of doing business, that cost of good goes up, and it's transferred all the way up the supply chain, all the way to the retailer, and then to the consumer. So take that into consideration.
Thank you. Sir, do you have a public comment on this particular agenda item?
Not really. Is this general comment or?
No, yeah, sorry, we gotta move on, yeah. Okay. Chair, that closes the public comment period.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Woolsey.
Yeah, I'd like to just make some comments to provide some context for the public who might not have made it to the subcommittee meeting. I'll start by echoing Mr. Nikita's comment. The security guard recommendation is that the licensing authorities should consider establishing, it isn't that they necessarily mandate armed guards, uniformed guards, 24/7 guards. It's just that they look at those different activities, the different cannabis space activities, and try to make a recommendation on, or look at what would be reasonable. It could include having one guard patrol multiple sites so that multiple business owners could contribute and not have to bear the burden of the expense alone. Again, not necessarily armed guards, not necessarily uniformed guards. And then to move on to the video surveillance, the purpose behind video surveillance from a law enforcement perspective is twofold. It's not to watch the people who are doing their composting right, it's to catch the people who are doing it wrong. And it's also to provide leads should a business be robbed or burglarized. The video can help provide leads on who did the burglary, or at least provide evidence to help catch them. So that's the purpose of it. In reviewing the regulations, there are already a lot of areas that are covered under the video surveillance requirement, where the waste disposal might actually already fall into, because it talks about limited access areas. So it might be a little bit redundant in that perspective, but that's the purpose behind it, at least from our perspective.
Then just a quick note that a lot of our cultivators in the northern part of the state, and then probably in the central northern part of the state, are off-grid. So some of the surveillance components could really be very challenging to even meet the suggested requirements in here.
Member Nikita, so I will say that I think I've been convinced by the testimony today that there is too much disparity across the demographics of businesses in this state to legislate one form of security for all those businesses, and perhaps it is best left to the locals. And Mr. Woolsey and I, we have big urban jurisdictions, and maybe what we do in our jurisdictions is going to be more restrictive than somewhere where many cultivators are off-grid, for example. I didn't say that just for the applause, by the way.
My only concern is that they're lumped together, and I think the guidance, especially on the second item, with kind of outlining which might be best practices, addressing some of the things that Mr. Grant talked about is, how do you make security look appropriate for the community environment and not scary or threatening? Because some of that stuff can encourage also bad behavior if it's not done properly. Most of our law enforcement people use appropriate attire depending on what they're doing and how they're doing it. So I don't want to see, if some people feel that one should be local control and the other one shouldn't, and we lose both of these, we should split these. I would ask that they split these two as well.
Okay, Ms. Todd, are you okay with splitting these two?
Why not?
All right. Can we get you to revise your motion to address number 3 first?
Sorry, I'm missing out. So I move for the adoption of number 3 on video surveillance by the committee.
Could I just ask a clarifying question? Do we have to make a motion for every recommendation? Could we just not move anything? And
Well, yeah, no, it gets a little complicated. I mean, technically, yeah, we need to get consensus. That was the whole point. Otherwise, the recommendation of the subcommittee, it's supposed to be heard by the full committee, and then we make the adoption as a full committee, whether or not that item moves forward. So, in a case like this or any other from here on out, if we don't have, look, if you don't want to make the motion, you don't have to. And if no one else wants to step up and get a second, then we don't need to continue that. It's a much.
Chair Vaughn, since it was 2 motions split up into 2 for purposes of voting, and since we heard public comment, does it have to go back to public comment on the second go-around, or can we just go through 2 votes?
No, I think we're okay. Because there's no modification to the language this time. So let's see. So anybody willing to move on number 3? And saying none, okay, go to number 4.
Okay. So then I move for the adoption by the committee of recommendation number 4, which has to do with security personnel standards.
Okay, we have a motion on number 4. Do we have a second?
Second.
Is that Mr. Farrow? No.
Cermak, second.
Cermak. Thank you, Doctor. All right.
Note for the record, Member Jacobson has left, but we still have quorum. Baboulian.
4 only, right? Yes. Nay.
Cermak.
Nay.
Clifford. No. Farrow. No. Heidelbach Terremoto.
No.
Harada.
Nay.
Nevidal.
Nay.
Nikita.
No.
Peck.
Nay.
Ron.
Nay.
Stevenson.
Nay.
Sweeney.
Ditto.
Is that a nay?
Yes.
Todd.
Nay.
Woolsey.
Nay.
Woo. You.
No.
Motion fails.
All right. All right, Ms. Todd.
Well, if we're not going to bring number 3 to a vote, then we're done with enforcement.
Right, okay. Okay, just for clarification, we are at just after 4:30. We have this room till 6 o'clock today, so we're going to try and power through as much of this as we can, but we still need to leave time at the end for the discussion, Mr. Baboulian, that we had earlier on priority items. Seems like yours is maybe the only one that's been pulled so far, so that may be efficient for us, but we also need to have public comment on items not on the agenda and future agenda items.
I believe there was also an agreement we were going to be looking at the compassionate use before there's a loss of a quorum.
Right. Well, to be specific, it's compassionate use as putting that on as a priority item for a future agenda, right?
I understood that that was for this meeting.
So again, we're operating under state rules on this, and if our attorney could tell me if I'm wrong or not, but if that's not a specific agenda item that we have addressed, we are addressing it periodically as we go through certain agenda items, but to call it out as a separate public discussion, I believe, again, we're following the rules here.
Were there
We're a bit limited on that.
two recommendations put forward by the Public Health Youth Subcommittee that, that are on the agenda?
Right. So in interest of that, why don't we go to, skip forward and go straight to that item rather than, so if you, I believe you're the chair, is that correct?
I am, yes, sir, and I'm willing to go straight to that item, and then you can go back to the agenda.
So we're going to move on to number 11, just for clarification.
You want to do the whole of number 11?
Yes.
Okay. Looking at the regulatory sides, and excuse my reading because of my vision, it may sometimes be a little bit slower, but recommendation number 1 was regarding proper identification of age training, and the recommendation went that the Bureau should include in its regulations an employee training requirement on proper identification, verification, to prevent sale of cannabis and cannabis products to youth. This was essentially similar to what we see in under ABC with bartenders, I would think, and the comments by the staff were that this would require budgetary change in order to have the staff in order to develop such a program. Recommendation number 2, I'll save that for the end and put it together with their statutory one. Recommendation number 3, I have to find. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Yes, recommendation number 3 had to do with branded vehicles. These are delivery trucks which have signs that appear to be promotional, and whether or not that falls under the level of advertising. So the recommendation was that the Bureau should study whether or not branded vehicles fall under existing restrictions, and essentially the staff comments were that yes, indeed, when designed to promote, that these fall under the restrictions regarding advertising. Number 4 has to do with health claims advertising, and boy, do we want to get into that again? But our recommendation at this point was that adult use cannabis should not be allowed to make health claims in advertising. And the staff said that this recommendation seeks to address unsubstantiated health claims, but I think that's wrong. It was all health claims in adult use advertising. So I'd like to correct what I think the staff said there. And recommendation number 5 was data collection, and we believe that the recommendation is that the Bureau of Cannabis Control, and quite frankly, I think that should have been the Department of Public Health rather than the BCC, but should collect data and report yearly on youth and adult use and abuse, on ER visits, treatment episodes, DUI, and poison control calls related to cannabis use. The thought was that this is a fast-moving industry and fast-moving regulations and legislation, and we need that data on a yearly basis. The staff commented that it seeks to require the Bureau to collect data, and that's not something that the Bureau is designed to do, so that there would be budgetary problems in order to hire additional staffing to do that. And then there was on advertising, recommendation number 6 on advertising age to specific audience. And that went on to the statutory, so that we'll get to that at another time. So there was one, now I'm going to go to the 2 that have to do with compassionate use. And there was one recommendation, which is number 2. And that recommendation was that all regulatory agencies should create special state, and we said and local, but that should probably not be true because they can't do that, but special state licensing process for those programs that provide free compassionate medical cannabis, and that should be exempt from fees and taxes. And this change should be, change should include all non-commercial cannabis, and by that we meant those that are being given in a charity-free way or at very reduced cost. And what was the staff comments on that? That reducing compassionate medical cannabis fees would require the Bureau to re-examine its fee structure and might actually raise the licensing fees for some other licensees. The statutory one, which I think is probably our clearest recommendation on compassionate care programs, just simply reads this way. The recommendation is that we encourage the full advisory committee to recommend a legislative fix for compassion-based programs.
All right, thank you for that. So do you...
Would it make sense to move the 2 compassion-based recommendations first?
Yes.
Since those are the ones that we believe are emergency issues.
Is that your motion? Yes.
So I move adoption of those 2 recommendations.
All right, we have a motion and second by Mr. Sweeney.
Is that just to clarify, those are recommendations 2 and 7, correct, that you're seeking for
I believe that's right.
be adopted? Thank you.
Yes, that's moving recommendations 2 and 7.
Okay, discussion. We're cool with it. Seeing none, all right. Open that public comment.
Mr. Cermak,
Yes. I'm sorry.
or Mr. Chair, Mr. Cermak, would you be open to modifying the recommendation for number 2, compassionate medical cannabis, to explicitly strike the requirement for a state ID card to be eligible for the compassionate use program. We have this included in our retail subcommittee, which I supported, but I believe it would be most appropriate to address it here in this public health and youth subcommittee. So would you be willing to modify recommendation number 2?
There was some applause over at this end, and I didn't hear the entire friendly amendment. So if you could repeat that, please.
The recommendation would be to modify recommendation number 2 to explicitly strike the requirement for a state ID card to be eligible for the compassionate use program.
Yes, I accept that.
Can you clarify, does the second accept that, or is it?
Yes. Okay, any other comments from the members? Seeing none, let's go to public comment, please.
Okay, so we're taking public comment now on number 2 and 7 with the most recent amendment to strike requirements for state ID card for compassionate use. With that, let's get started.
Susan Tibbin, California Growers Association farmers have historically donated to Sweet Leaf Compassion Use Program, as well as other similar programs. That being said, we who farm and grow the plants that fuel all of this do not want to be the 21st century burseros. We don't have a Cesar Chavez anymore. We do have Dolores Huerta, who spoke across the way today. So that fight continues, but please don't be tempted to pit us against people who are ill and or poor. We suggest that any reexamination of fees and implementation of higher fees be tied to gross receipts across all license types. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, next up.
Max Bigalonis on behalf of Flow Canna and the California Cannabis Delivery Alliance in support of the amended motion, particularly appreciating the inclusion of the language expanding compassionate access to those just with a doctor's recommendation as opposed to the requirement of an ID card. It's a significant additional barrier to compassion to have an ID card for those that are ill, those that are seriously ill, parents of ill children, those that are disabled, those that are veterans, those that are homeless. So the clients strongly support that amendment and this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up.
Hello, Jimmy Diamond. I'm an HIV patient. When I originally thought getting my state card would be a good idea. So I went to the AIDS Health Foundation to talk to my doctor, which isn't really a doctor. She's a nurse practitioner, which doesn't qualify to even sign the form. And after arguing with the MD about me wanting the card, he was against anything to do with cannabis. So he basically almost expelled me from being a patient from the AIDS Health Foundation over just asking for the card. And then I found later on that some people can lose their guns, and some other people on some low-income programs are at risk of losing those if different agencies find out, to my understanding. So then that made me not want a state card at all. So it's very important that at least the doctor's rec is good for anything for these programs.
Next up.
Hi, I am Deborah Silvernight. I've been a member of WHAM for 20-plus years, a Women's Alliance for Medical Marijuana, and I'm a former mental health nurse. I am now dealing with a severe osteoarthritis, low acute back injury that is crippling, clinical depression, and knee replacements. I have nothing but gratitude and respect for the Women's Alliance for Medical Marijuana, an organization, stellar organization that has improved the quality of my life and many others in a myriad of ways. The affordable organic cannabis I received has eliminated my past use of specific pharmaceuticals and their undesired effects. Without the compassion this amazing organization provides, clients like myself would suffer greatly. We are financially and physically compromised. I, nor so many others, can survive without WHAM. What if this was you? Think about it. Thank you for consideration. Also, this state law that has passed does not address the needs for compassion access for patients. And please look at that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up.
Thank you, Jackie.
Hello, my name is Staff Sergeant retiree Joe Rosario. Served for 23 years. I'm a retired disabled combat veteran. Served under 2 Iraq wars. Served under 4 presidents. Diagnosed with chronic pain, osteoarthritis, anxiety, depression, TBI, and PTSD. Was on 6 to 7 different pain medicines, 5 to 6 mood medicines for my PTSD, plus GERD and allergies. I was on 15 pills daily for 6 years. Also, there are 22 veteran suicides a day because of the VA overdosing, over-medicating our veterans. And because of that, I volunteer as a Weed for Warrior Modesto chapter president. I currently donate cannabis to 50 veterans monthly to help with their disabilities. By taxing donation, it's going to affect not just donators, but also a disabled veteran's way of life. You're going to make heroes into criminals. Please have a heart. Thank you. Patience before profit.
Thank you very much. Next up.
I'm Jackie Russell. I'm from Wham. I've been a volunteer there for 20 years, and I cannot express to you how much this medicine means to people. The people that need it the most are the ones that don't have money. When you get sick, the first thing to go is your money and your friends, okay? It's really important. The thing with the state card also is a really big one too. Most of these people have been underground that use marijuana, don't want to be known. They're really afraid of the state card because they're afraid they're going to get pegged, you know, like a lot of other things that happen. But the most important thing I need to tell you is that this compassion thing is, wow, people are dying. People are hurting. I get between 50 and 100 calls at least a week, if not more, asking for marijuana. We can't give them. Oil, we can't give them because we can't afford the taxes. So please, please be sure that this goes through. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up.
Good afternoon. My name is John Adams. I'm the president of the Weed for Warriors project in the Inland Empire. I am also a cannabis patient. I have been a cannabis patient since my discharge from the United States Marine Corps, serving 2 tours in Vietnam, getting sprayed with Agent Orange and all that other crazy stuff. I am currently on VA disability and your infamous Social Security. Now, if there's any of you out there that are on Social Security or VA disability, you know you can't really survive on that. Fortunately, I have a wife to help me. But if you take away the compassion program that we presently have, you're going to kill people like me. Because I can't afford to get out there and go pay all these high prices that you're going to stick on the commercial part of this. I can't do it. Help us out. We're all veterans. We fought for this country. Help us out.
Thank you. All right, next up. And sir, if you could just release your chair for the next speaker, that'd be great. Thank you. All right, go ahead.
My name is Brandon Lopez, U.S. Army retired. The compassion program saved my life. I'm gonna get emotional. I played the VA game. I was on 52 pills a day. They led me, all those pills that are on these commercials, led me to suicide. I sat in a parking lot with a gun to my head because of pain medication. I was at the police department before joining the military. Thought marijuana was terrible. Thought it was a horrible thing. I was so wrong. To take this away from veterans like myself who can't afford it, who deal with the fight of the VA and fighting for everything that our paychecks, our rights, and then have to come and fight for a medication that's safer than the crap that they gave me is ridiculous. My kid's got a father back from this medication, not a man sitting in a parking lot ready to put a gun to his head. My military service was cut short. Don't put me in a 2nd grade by taking away my medication, please. Don't do it. There's so many vets like myself that have the same story. I advocate for them. Don't make them a statistic, please.
Thank you. All right. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jackie McGowan, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself as a patient. What you're hearing today from the audience is a cry for help. Every single part of this implementation process is broken. Small growers were assured large licenses would not be available until 2020. That was a lie. Consumers were led to believe this transition would be smooth and seamless. That was a lie. Patients were told that Prop 64 would leave medical the way that it was. That was a lie. Now I realize that most of you did not work on this campaign and that none of you are responsible for the many promises that they failed to uphold, but we have to address the pain that is being felt by so many in this room today. What veterans and patient advocates are here trying to communicate to you is this: people in need of compassion will die without your help. I want to tell you that people are suffering in this room. I want to tell the people in this room today that I hear you. I feel your pain. And I, Jackie McGowan, promise to do whatever I can possibly do at the state level to ensure that safe access is restored to you as soon as possible, because I am you.
Thank you, Jackie. All right, next up.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for everyone for your endurance today. My name is Ryan Miller of Operation EVAC, educating veterans about cannabis. I'd like to thank Dr. Cernak and Beverly Yu for your courageousness today. We facilitate social support groups for troopers. We sit in a circle and we have guided discussions. We meditate for 20 minutes. And we distribute complimentary compassionate cannabis and educate about the safe consumption of these products. We do that because opiates are free at the VA. Antidepressants are free at the VA. Jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge is free. We desperately need a pathway to compliance. We need to restore the pipeline of philanthropy and prevent the emergence of a philanthropic black market. Thank you.
Thanks very much. All right, go ahead.
Hi, so I have a petition to submit. This is over 2,000 signatures supporting compassion. So, my name is Joseph Aroni, and I am the founder and director of the Sweet Leaf Collective. We've been providing free medical cannabis to low-income terminally ill patients since 1996. That makes us the second oldest medical marijuana group in the state. For more than 20 years, we have been easing the suffering of those in great need. Last year, we dispensed more than 100 pounds of cannabis. This year, to do that same amount, we will have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. But we can't operate now because of those taxes. We have a fully permitted supply chain with cultivators, transporters, and dispensaries. But we can't operate because of these taxes. What I would like to see is protection from compassion, but also a future where we can expand compassion. We need to have a new permit category for non-commercial compassion programs. We need to have no taxes for cultivators, distributors, labs, manufacturers, and dispensaries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, next up.
Hello. I just wanted to speak towards a personal experience of working at a compassionate youth center. I helped probably maybe 120 terminally ill patients receive their MMIP cards. But due to the time that it took in order to get these cards and to help their quality of life, a number of them actually passed away in the process of obtaining this card and were unable to better their quality of life just due to whatever regulations they had to go through in order to obtain these cards. So I'm just advocating for people who aren't here today in order to speak for themselves, but it's very real and people are losing their lives due to the lack of compassionate use.
Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to speak to the dosage limitations that have been put on both adult and medical patients. The medical use ones is meaningfully larger than the adult use one. It's laughable that we would try to cap this medication at that potency, and it prevents it from becoming a true medicine as potent as it could be.
Thank you. All right, next up.
Again, I'm speaking on behalf of poor, brown, sick people here. I think one community that was left out of this talk was the immigrant community. If you're a legal resident in California and you get a card, to medicate, to help to improve your quality of life, you're now deportable. So that's definitely, we got to look at that. That's a big majority of our population here in Los Angeles alone. So, thank you for bringing that up. And also the compassionate care, like you're hearing, this is sick people. This isn't just money. This isn't just enforcement. You have to keep it. This isn't like, even if we do a medicinal business, there's many, many barriers. If you haven't been operating for profit, you don't have the resources necessary to be able to comply. That's a problem because we care. We care. The people that care about the bottom line, they don't care. And I'm gonna tell you right now, there's licensed operators out here right now putting disgusting product on the market. So as far as safety is concerned, the people fighting for medicine is the people that care.
Thank you. All right, next up.
Thank you, committee. Thank you for your hard work. I commend you. You spend a lot of hours. We all do. It's really fun. It's a social experiment. Recently, Eric Stein and I, Ben Lubon with Jude Benedict and Associates, we just submitted alleged language to give the teeth for our DA and the legal grounds to take on Jeff Sessions. It will support banking. It'll support security. Someone made the comment about less security. We need high-end security. It's the age of lawlessness, and that's why I need banking. In Kern County, they ban it. I don't know how many people in this room have had a gun held to their head. But,
So we're on public health and youth.
yes, public health. There's been 3 execution-style killings there, and the last was raped. We need high-end security, and that's very important. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right.
It is a public safety issue.
And if you could just release your chair for the next commenter. Thank you.
Ryan Bacchus, CEO of the California Cannabis Coalition and Executive Director for the California Minority Alliance Inland Empire Chapter. I believe there have been many of things quite testy here today, but very, very many vocal opinions, especially vocal facts about the presence of the black market. And people need to realize, especially those who have a duty to not only be consistent with the rules and the regulations that have already been provided via ALMA, that the state legislature has the full authority to amend and prohibit and do whatever they need and make those recommendations to you. You need to focus on making less high restrictive regulations that are going to essentially demolish the medical market. That is the reason why we're even about to be approaching or maybe even have a somewhat of a dismantled recreational market. So in order for you guys to do what you need to do properly, Lori has done a tremendous job. But you guys need to understand and especially listen to these people. Because you do not understand from the industry standpoint, but you understand from a regulatory standpoint.
All right, next up, Paul.
Hi, Paul Hansberry, Lovingly and Legally. As far as the medical cards, especially for sick people, with the changes that are coming around with healthcare, a lot of people are afraid to get a card because it would be considered a pre-existing condition. Now, as far as the compassion, there is in Malcursa, Section 61, Article 26070.5, was a feasibility study for nonprofits. Unfortunately, the language in there was there was very few, if any, nonprofits that would qualify because of the structure of a nonprofit for the cannabis industry. But it gave the authority to local jurisdictions to start these programs for nonprofits who dispense to low-income or no-income people that the fees and the taxes would be waived. And then the state would then analyze it and see if it's feasible, and with this feasibility study. I would suggest that this feasibility study is here behind me right now, and please implement it.
Thank you. All right, next.
Hi, Carl Thompson with Inland Empire Normal. I'm really having trouble grasping how the pharmaceutical companies don't pay taxes, and yet the state is so insistent on taxing cannabis. It's considered a medicine. I really think you guys should really look at it in that manner. Why are they being treated differently than the other medicines that people are getting on a daily basis? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up. Hi.
Greetings, Ignite with Canna Solutions. Just want the committee to be mindful of not allowing big business to come in and, I'll stay away from that word, but take over. And because the people who need it the most are usually the people who are, like one of the gentlemen said, on Social Security, can't necessarily get up and get out and get around, or scared to come and say something because they don't want to be classified or, you know, put into a box of something that makes them ineligible for something else later on down the line, or different things of that nature. And just being mindful of when it comes to taxation in something of this sort that is a medicine, like the man said, pills aren't taxed. Our doctors will give us pills that'll kill us every day, but we can't give away something that will ensure that we can get up and still move around and still be able to do things, but we can be given something that'll put us to sleep or won't allow us to do anything at all.
Thank you very much. All right, next up. Go ahead.
I just wanted to speak on the behalf of myself as a patient, as a veteran, as a VA healthcare user. I've had extremely good luck dealing with them and them knowing about my history of cannabis use, and I've had good experience, but I know a lot of people haven't, and I know that going through the proper channels and doing the things like getting your card make things really hard for veterans with, especially with things like PTSD. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello
All right.
again. Thank you very much for considering all these things and taking the time with us here. And as a patient and a provider, like, I suffer from chronic rheumatoid arthritis, and if it wasn't for cannabis, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be working. I would be a burden. And for many of the people that I work with, they're in the same boats. They would be a burden, you know, and that's how they feel in life, is that they are a burden on everybody in their lives. I've seen people go from sitting on their couch to from sitting in wheelchairs to walking around and to seeking employment. Just the changes in the people's lives that need it the most are also the most financially impacted. It's very expensive to go through different, like just to go to a visit, to travel across the city to see a doctor.
Thank you. All right, next up.
I've been here, and I just want to ask the committee, are you guys going to address anything with the manufacturers as far as edibles or anything like that?
We're taking comments, just public comments right now, not answering questions on health and youth. I know you've been here a long time.
I will make one comment. I have nothing to do with the veterans, but personally, I have been to probably more sober living homes and mental hospitals than all of you put together. I was a visitor there. I wasn't a patient. And I've seen a lot of these vets, and they need their medicine. And it's so much better than the pills, because they do die on the pills. My son is one of them. Okay? And I didn't come here for that, but I'm just going to talk for all the vets. Yeah, my son was given psychiatric meds for years and years and years. We begged of him, just smoke some weed. And he wouldn't. And the pills killed him.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, next up.
I'm Timothy Blakely. I am from Antelope Valley Diamond Collective in Kern County. And I'm also the Chief Operations Officer at Green Warriors Incorporated. We work closely with Relay for Life Antelope Valley and the American Cancer Society. I challenge all of you on this board to go read the American Cancer Society's stance on cannabis. That's from the leaders themselves. I do educational programs for both the youth and for cancer patients regarding cannabis. And I also, like many of the people here, provide a free medication service for cancer patients, not just as a form of healing, but cannabis also helps them tolerate the medicines their doctors are making them take. So you need to understand the function of cannabis used as a medicine before you can judge any patient about it. All of the information is online. I ask you to look. Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, go ahead.
My name is Andrew Zamer. I come from a medical background with my family in oncology. I'm connected with LA Cancer Network, USC, Keck Pair, and I'm also a GLACA member. And I would like to say that the compassionate care that cannabis can provide for those patients is tremendous. I'm not going to claim it's going to be a cure. I'm claiming that it's an option, an alternative. And if you haven't tried a CBD product of your own on your own prime, or you have friends and family, I suggest that you give it a shot. You're on this panel. I don't know every one of you individually, but I would like to ask you to take the challenge and try cannabis if you haven't already. And if you're not willing to, ask any of one of your family members that are willing to give it a shot. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up.
I am Sarah Armstrong, Director of Industry Affairs for Americans for Safe Access. Founded in 2002, we are a large national organization that advocates on behalf of medical cannabis patients. Americans for Safe Access stands in sound, strong support of your two motions. I have been active in this area for 13 years in Los Angeles. The operators who spoke to you today, Virgil Grant, Greg Magurian, and many others in this audience today, have always had compassion programs, and over the years helped thousands of people. Please restore these programs. They are essential for the poor, and believe me, you are not the people who have to talk to the sick and dying about why there are no more compassion programs. And I hope today you will not only pass these motions, but make it your personal business to see that these programs are restored. Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, next up, go ahead.
How's it going? My name is Joshua Jenkins. I'm with Loyal Penguin Incorporated. At Loyal Penguin, our mission is to improve the lives of American veterans. So I come to you today to talk about that tax that you are effectively placing by placing further burdens on and regulatory barriers to medical patients being able to attain this medicine. I mean, let's just put it into perspective. If 15% of every pharmaceutical purchase has to be paid by the customer, do you think a lot of people would get a lot of pills they get? No, they wouldn't. Let me go ahead and answer that. And so the VA is giving those pills, and they're looking at it as medicine from the get. But there's a presumption that there's something wrong with cannabis, and that's the problem. You're not looking at it as a medicine, which is what it was before it was an adult relaxant. It was a medicine. And that is the intent of the Compassionate Use Act in 1996, and that intent needed to be carried through, and it was carried through with Proposition 64. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Greg McGarren, CEO, Coenga Caregivers, President of GLACA, and veteran. And when I was listening to my brothers and sisters speak, I started getting emotional because I started thinking to myself, if something doesn't change, I can't even help them. I mean, technically, I wouldn't even be able to help myself by giving myself free cannabis. And so when the motion was made to amend from the MMIC to just a rec, that was a very happy moment for me. And from just registering, jeopardizing different benefits that they're getting, and also the financial impact of the extra taxes, if a doctor makes a recommendation that you should have it, that should be good enough for you to get your sales tax exemption as well, not just have to have a medical marijuana ID card in order to get your sales tax exemption. And thank you for that motion.
Thank you. All right, last speaker. Go ahead.
Ralph Trueblood, Wham. I imagine waking up tomorrow morning and not being able to move your arms or legs, and imagine your skin feels creepy and crawly and burns and itches, and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, there are very many Californians, thousands, that wake up that way every morning. What I wanted to say is over the last 20 years, I've made hundreds, many hundreds of home visits. And if you could see the relief that one little puff off a joint or a power hit gives to these people, you would do everything in your power to make sure that they get medicine as quickly and as cheaply as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chair, that concludes public comment on this portion of the agenda.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor for items number 2 and number 7. Any other discussion?
Move the previous question.
All right, let's do the roll call vote.
Babulian.
Aye.
Cermak.
Aye.
Farrow.
Aye.
Heidelbeck Terremoto.
Aye.
Harada.
Aye.
Nevedal.
Aye.
Nikita.
Aye.
Heck.
Aye.
Ron.
Aye.
Stevenson.
Aye.
Sweeney. Todd.
Aye.
Woolsey.
Aye.
Wu. You.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, Dr. Cermak, we've got items number 2 and 7 on your subcommittee. Would you like to move the rest?
Thank you very much. I would like, I'd like it to be noted in the minutes that that was unanimous, so that when we communicate to the legislature, we note that. So I move that the other recommendations be adopted by the full committee.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sweeney. All right, any discussion?
That's for pretty much all the other recommendations. Do I have a minute?
Sorry, Dr. Cermak, can you clarify just for the record the numbers that you're moving?
Oh, that would be number 1, number 3, 4, 5, and I think number 6.
Okay, thank you. All right, we had a motion second. Seeing no discussion among the colleagues, open for public comment, please.
So we're still on public health and youth, and we're just going through the rest of the recommendations. Right now, the motion on the floor is to accept recommendations 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then the rest will go to the full committee at our Oakland meeting. All right, so the woman with the pretty green scarf.
I guess that's me. Thank you. Congratulations on the preceding vote. I would like to express the support of my own support in the Public Health Institute for all of the recommendations of the Public Health Committee. They are all important, proper identification. In particular, I would like to speak to health claim advertising. Adult use cannabis is not medicinal cannabis. Medicinal cannabis should be used for specific purposes, as you just saw. However, adult use cannabis and 90% of use in the United States is recreational. We do not label alcohol as something that can help you treat your anxiety or treat your delirium tremens or vasodilate you. We label it as whiskey. And similarly, adult use cannabis should not be labeled with health claims. That contributes to a halo effect of where you have advertising that uniquely speaks about positive health effects and does not address the negative health effects. It exacerbates problems like what we're seeing with increased youth in use and in pregnancy.
Thank you. All right, next up. Do you mind if Susan, we'll just go over to Susan?
Could I just ask one question? What happened to 8, 9, 10, and 11?
They're going to go to the next full advisory committee for discussion.
Even though they're not statutory?
That's correct. They are statutory.
No, not the last ones. They're other.
Right, they were a little bit difficult to classify, so they're both statutory and non, so we're still going to be addressing those at the next meeting.
Thank you. All right, go ahead.
So I can make sure I'm on the right page, I'm speaking about recommendation number 1. Are we there yet?
Yes, we're talking about 1, 3,
Excellent.
4, 5, and 6.
Perfect.
Okay.
Recommendation number 1, we're talking about the level of equity licensing. I think this is super important. Me being an African-American male coming from the community that I come from, it is important when we have this conversation about licensing and about the legalization of cannabis, we have to go back and talk about social equity.
Sorry, sir. We're still on public health and youth, number 1.
Oh, okay, then I'll hold it for...
Sorry, I know it's confusing. All right. Susan, go ahead.
Thank you. Proper identification training. For those of us who have not had the pleasure of doing public forums in dispensaries, youth are not allowed in licensed dispensaries. All entrants must present a valid photo ID. All delivery personnel must present a valid photo ID. Referencing youth, is a feel-good position. However, this is misdirected. It's a waste of money. If we are truly concerned about education, we all would be better served by money spent on curriculum and training about the endocannabinoid system, state-of-the-art information about medical cannabis.
Thank you. All right, next up.
Hi, Jackie Subek. I am talking about number 4, the health claim advertising. I wanted to know, so we're trying to protect our consumers from the cannabis industry giving them false claims that cannabis does great things for you. I've seen cannabis packaging that does the opposite, and it gives you a false claim that cannabis is bad for you. Does this go both directions? It's something I want you to think about. I've literally seen packaging that says, instead of saying cannabis may impair your driving, I've seen packaging that says cannabis impairs your driving. I would like to see the science behind that. So I want to make sure that we're going both directions on this and protecting ourselves and our consumers from false advertising the other direction. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up.
Hi, Greg McGarry again. So on item number 1, 2 things. One, already we have a program at the state level. It's called STARS Training. It teaches the security guards and bartenders and people in all security aspects. They have to go get certified on how to read ID, and it's called STARS Training. That's 1. And then 2, we're required by both our state and local law to have ID readers, and they do the job for you. You just put the scanner over the ID, and it tells you if it's a fake or real or valid ID, and then you just have to look at it. It's not rocket science. So I believe that there is already laws there in place to address this, and we don't have to recreate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up.
Yes. Hi, Roz McCarthy, CEO, founder of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Actually, I'll take about 30 seconds. I agree with the young man and the lady before me. When you look at in regards to identification in number 1, I think there's some redundancy, and we would prefer, if you're going to spend money and allocate budget, you look at things like cultural competency training and other different areas versus training about how to ID if there's a youth or not. I think there's some things already in place. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, next up.
I had to come up because some lady was trying to compare this to alcohol. That just blows my mind. This entire program was started 20 years ago in order to give people that needed medicine, the medicine that they needed, that was just made illicit for almost no reason. If we can't brand our medicine as medicine, you guys are here operating under adult use, medical use. It just blows my mind. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right, next up.
Stephanie Hopper with Candescent. I do want to talk about advertising age. This, I guess, really shows the lack of education that people truly have about cannabis, when not all cannabis gets you high. And that's a big thing that we would like to be able to educate people on. The statistics in Colorado, youth, after they've been educated, their use is actually down. It's not up. And they've done studies, and they asked the teenage kids what they were most afraid of, and they said the pill parties. They're afraid of being obligated to bring pills and just take random pills out of a bowl. It's not cannabis. They're getting educated about that. By trying to raise the percentage up, you're decreasing our ability to normalize this and help educate people. And the only way that we're going to really normalize something and have people not be so afraid of it is to truly be able to educate them. So I would encourage you not to raise the percentage.
Thanks so much. Chair, that closes the public comment period.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Can we do the roll call?
Just for the record, members Clifford and Nikita have left, but we still have quorum.
Hang on, we have ma'am, we want to be as inclusive as possible. Let's see what you have to say. Thank you. Go ahead.
Are we closed?
No, go ahead, please.
My name is Dr. Marcella McSorley. I am coming into this arena from the pharmaceutical industry. I have a couple of decades in where I am making drugs. I'm also building laboratories. What do you say is the biggest hurdle for building laboratories to test, to have absolute on-fire tests?
We're on public health and
for
youth.
Cannabis.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Okay, so can we have the call for the question, please?
What's the
Well-
motion?
The motion on the table is for the committee to approve recommendations 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6 from the Subcommittee on Public Health and Youth.
Before we go to a roll call, I'd like to make a comment and possibly separate one or two of the line items, because here's the thing. To think that kids don't have access to it today when they're underage, I mean, look, there was a comment made suggesting that underage sales go up anywhere where you introduce cannabis. There's no legitimate data to suggest use increases. In fact, it's actually the opposite from markets that do have data, such as Colorado's, where it does decrease. And the reality is the black market doesn't card, the black market doesn't turn down an underage sale. The company that spent millions getting a license, the company that's got all these compliance issues that they got to deal with, they are going to card, they are not going to risk their license for an underage sale. I do agree with some of the recommendations, the list of recommendations, but going back to the health claim one, I'd like to suggest a friendly removal of that one as part of this overall vote. And also actually that one.
Removal of just, which one? Just one?
Okay.
The health claim advertisement, adult use cannabis should not be allowed to make health claims in advertisement. We discussed that in the other one. Granted, this is on adult use specifically, but again, it would be the same comments, so I would suggest friendly to remove that from the overall vote.
Yeah, we can do that.
Well, I'm willing to vote on that separately for the purpose of safeguarding the other ones, so that's fine with me.
Okay.
I'd also like to pull number 6 out, if we may, and vote on that separately.
Okay, so we've pulled number 4 and, I'm sorry,
I think it's number 6, the increasing, it's a statutory recommendation to increase the percentage of market that needs to be above 21 for advertising purposes.
Okay, I'm willing to vote on the others and look at those separately if you wish.
okay. Will you rephrase your motion for us, Dr. Cermak?
Then it would be to vote on numbers 1, is it 3? I can't scan quick.
1, 3, and 5?
1, 3, and 5, yes.
All right.
And that would be a motion to adopt, correct?
Motion to adopt 1, 3, and 5.
And I approve that as a seconder.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Can we have the roll call vote then?
Baboyan.
Aye.
Cermak.
Aye.
Farrow.
Aye.
Huddleback Terremoto.
Aye.
Harada.
Aye.
Nevedal.
Aye.
Peck.
Aye.
Ron.
Aye.
Stevenson. Sweeney.
Aye.
Todd.
Aye.
Woolsey.
Aye.
Woo. You.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, Dr. Cermak, we have numbers 4 and 6 left. How would you like to handle those?
Well, I think I would like to do those one at a time. Number 4, I feel very, very strongly about that when we are selling something which is recreational, like gum, like coffee, that we should not permit health claims for those products.
Okay, do we have a motion? Do we have, on number 4, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, yes, we do. Let's go ahead and take the vote, please.
Baboyan.
Nay.
Cermak.
Aye.
Pharaoh.
Aye.
Heidelbeck Terremoto.
Aye.
Harada.
Abstain.
Nevedal.
Abstain.
Peck.
Aye.
Ron.
Aye.
Stevenson. Sweeney. Todd.
Aye.
Woolsey.
Aye.
Woo. You.
Abstain.
Motion passes.
Okay, and looking at number 6, I'd just like to make a few comments on that. And it's that the, let's see, in 2004, the Institute of Medicine recommended that, that if you want to avoid getting advertising for alcohol to the youth group 12 to 20, that raising the percentage up to 85 was useful, and they had some data on that. And so I think the same thing holds since we're talking about watching the same shows, reading the same magazines, that we're just interested in preventing the type of advertising which is going to adults, to going to as many people under 20 as we can.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Any additional comments, questions, members? No. Roll call vote, please.
Baboyan.
Aye.
Cermak.
Aye.
Pharaoh.
Aye.
Heidelbeck Terremoto.
Aye.
Harada.
Aye.
Nevedal.
I'm going to abstain.
Peck.
Nay.
Ron.
Nay.
Stevenson. Sweeney.
Nay.
Todd.
Aye.
Woolsey.
Nay.
Woo. You.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right.
Thank you very much. The rest of the recommendations will be held to the next meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Cermak. Okay, Mr. Sweeney, we have 30 minutes left here today. How do you feel about moving through equity in 20 minutes or less? All right, let's do it. Thank you, sir. Can we get a brief report from you on that one?
Do we have microbusiness still? Isn't microbusiness still on the agenda too?
First of all, our committee met twice. This is a very hot topic. We unequivocally, or many of us unequivocally, support this. We have on number 7, discussion and possible action to approve, modify, or reject the subcommittee equities recommendations. Since we have 20 minutes, this is a very vital and important subject. I don't want to rush, but I want to move, if it's appropriate, I want to move all the recommendations. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Good discussion, members.
I have a question about item number 1. So in some areas of the state, equity would be very different from, say, where it is in what it looks like in Oakland. So how would this relate or pertain to rural areas where we have, I mean, like in Humboldt, say?
Well,
Could it possibly apply to, small cultivators that, I just want to make sure that it's not a request to take the programs that already exist that don't necessarily provide equity into broader ranges than what's been provided, and then blanket those at the state level. I just want to make sure that there's equity can be further broadened beyond what the local programs that have been developed suggest.
Yes, we discussed this in our meeting. We discussed the possibility that pertains to certain disadvantages that rural communities face. But to be quite candid with you, that may be your concern, and I want to let you know we are addressing that concern. We would want this to be subsumed in the recommendations that we have. However, the equity issue is really because of the disadvantages that people have faced for a variety of reasons that I'm sure you're very aware of. Yes, you're asking, can it apply? Yes. Was it contemplated to apply? Yes.
Yeah, I'll just add, and I think I was quickly just scanning to see, because I think the concept of what an equity applicant is actually encompassed in a number of the different recommendations. But a bulk of the discussion was about having the state, wanting the state, on the state level, to adopt an equity program, but to ensure that that equity program reflected what was happening on the local level. So it would reflect, and to encourage local equity programs to develop that evaluate the needs and the values within those communities, and then have those serve as a guide on the state level, so that it's not one model that's across the state in terms of equity, but they're looking, because even within the cities that have well-developed programs, they have significant differences in terms of what Sacramento and LA and San Francisco and Oakland adopted. And Sacramento, right? So the design was very much, yes, we need an equity program on the state level that helps those local equity applicants, but that what an equity applicant is driven by the local community and the local values.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
And just from my perspective with the local government sort of eye toward this, I don't think this was intended to provide an all-inclusive policy or program that the state would run, but that it works hand in glove with the programs that are being identified by local jurisdictions, right? So it's not that the state is trying to apply, heavy regulations to local government. They're providing sort of the more policy directive on this and encouraging the development of this as other cities have, but that local government ultimately retains a significant authority in creating its equity programs that are more appropriate for their own particular communities.
Well, the issue here is that, to me, the issue here is that there have been communities that have been disproportionately victimized all across this state. And it's disproportionately affected people of color, African Americans, Latinos. It's also disproportionately affected women. It has disproportionately affected several categories. But we have had people who've gone to jail for 20 years for having a joint. So we want to have a program that addresses these issues. And I think we are asking for that, and that's why I asked that I did it at one time. I want all the recommendations to be approved, because we need them all.
All right, any further comment by the members?
I'd just like to speak to recommendation number 2. I don't have a problem with equity programs and fee waivers and things like that, but on the subject of loans, as a taxpayer, right, a loan you give with expectation of getting it paid back, and especially from budgetary perspectives, people are going to be banking on that money coming back. Only fear is that some of that money doesn't come back, and now you have a bailout situation. And so just out of all the things here, I would like waivers and equity programs, but probably not in the form of loans.
Well, I hear what you're saying.
All right. That said, let's go to public comment, please.
Actually, Chair Ron, I had a couple of comments. At the state level, on the social equity side, we absolutely need something addressed to identify some of the issues with the different municipalities and different licensing authorities as it relates to equity. One, it's what are the qualifiers? What qualifies somebody as a social equity participant in one jurisdiction?
Can we get the volume down? Sorry. Go ahead.
One of the issues with social equity implementation across the different municipalities is every municipality has a different definition and different qualifiers. I think some of the stuff the state can do is create a uniform set of standardized qualifiers for social equity, create a list, create some sort of a funding mechanism, expedited processing. There's a lot that can be done at the state level that can bring a lot of the different social equity programs across the different municipalities in line with each other, so it's not a guessing game. It's not what goes on in one jurisdiction, now in another jurisdiction, something gets completely changed up. So, because on the other side, if you have a state social equity program, because of the dual licensing nature of the overall application process, how do you introduce that at the local level, especially in cities that have already gone through and processed applications? For instance, there's a situation in Long Beach. Long Beach went through the application process, issued licenses under their medical program. They have a 6-month moratorium on adult use, and they're trying to introduce the social equity component. But now you have a situation where licenses for medical have already been issued, adult use licenses are pending with the moratorium in place, and then the introduction of social equity. So I think a lot of the stuff that the state can do is bring a lot of the uncertainties in line with each other across the different
that's
areas.
not our local. We would, but we've.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can you limit the comments? Sorry. I think the mics are live.
Sorry.
Stevenson, I'd like to add something. To echo what Richard Sweeney stated is to remedy the war on drugs. And social equity does not mean diversity. This is clearly designed to assist a demographic that looks like me or close to me. And when you live inside of communities that have been affected, these issues are still here. I went and visited my old neighborhood last week, and it's 2 blocks from USC, and they're still selling crack. So these issues are still happening, and there needs to be a remedy. Now, I'm not a social equity applicant, so I get nothing out of this. But what I get out of this is a humanitarian need that I have to fulfill. So I encourage everyone to look at this through my lens, and it might not be easy, but, become melanated for a minute.
Come on now.
So I agree with you that there's been lots of issues with the war on drugs, but I also want to point out that some of the issues with war on drugs has also been families being ripped apart due to camp and heavy prosecution of farmers. And so I just want to make sure that we don't pigeonhole this in any way, shape, or form where we can't address additional issues surrounding the effects on communities of all sorts
due to the war on drugs.
Okay, and to that, I would like to say that how much, I understand what happened with Camp. However, we're talking about the introduction of harmful drugs into a community that has destabilized the community. And I am a firm believer that those that live in the Camp region should be forgiven for the felonies that they've acquired, that they shouldn't be prevented from assimilating and matriculating into a regulated market. However, it's two different things. It doesn't mean that we can't provide an opportunity for those cultivators, because I believe that everyone should have an opportunity to be in the marketplace. Social equity is just a little bit different.
Yes.
I mean, no disrespect, but it's really hard watching parents be flown away in helicopters and families be split apart, and the devastation that that causes to a community. I mean, it is rampant. Like, we lived in Humboldt County for decades with camp that started every Monday after the first weekend in August, and it ran all the way through to October. And you could tell what neighborhoods were getting raided because all of the women and children were in town, and all of the men were on the hill trying to make sure that people were not getting hauled off to jail, and that people's valuables were not being looted. And I mean, and I mean no disrespect whatsoever. Various communities have been affected, really had a lot of devastation because of the war on drugs, and I just want to hold that point.
Correct, and the war on drugs did occur, and that's one situation of the war on drugs. But what I want to say is the issues that impacted our communities caused women to sell themselves to fuel this desire to consume crack cocaine. It caused an exponential rise in gang violence, murders, and things that the community still have irreparable harm.
Wait a minute, let me just say this. You both have made your points, and I think they've been very explicit. And you said we only had 20 minutes on an issue that should take all day. And so
that's right.
I would think that we would want to let the people who are in the audience express themselves. We already have a motion and a second on the motion. If you,
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see who sat down first, so I'll just trust your judgment.
I'll take the mic.
What choice do we have? No, yes, please, Virgil.
Virgil Grant. I just want to throw something out there. 4-1. 4-1. That means 4 black men have went to jail to 1 white counterpart. That is a true factual number. It's undisputable. So let's understand. I've had property in Humboldt for 30 years. I've been through a Met and a camp raid. I understand that. I understand it intimately. And I've been through the community for 30 years. So I have a lot of white counterparts that were in Humboldt. But I came from Compton. And Humboldt didn't go to jail like Compton did.
That's right. That's right.
Not saying that the people that did go to jail in Humboldt, that was terrible too. But let's be clear, there's a big difference here in numbers. And this is where the failed war on drugs has, as the brother said, ravaged our community more than anything. We need to look a little deeper into the social equity program and what it's really for. Thank you.
She's going to go now.
Having a little bit of trouble with my screen, but I can see the time.
Okay, well, we see jellyfish, and that's kind of nice at this time of day.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just going to assume I have a little bit more time.
Please go.
Hi, my name is Kat Packer. I'm the Executive Director of the Department of Cannabis Regulation for the City of Los Angeles. I appreciate that this conversation is happening. It's an extremely important conversation to have. and grounded in the fact that we're not really talking about the last 20 years of the war on drugs, but the war on drugs as it has been present here in the United States really since the early 1920s, starting off with Harry Anslinger, who was the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. And so I think that when we ground this conversation, it's also important to give it historical context. How we can move this conversation forward, I think that it makes a lot of sense for local jurisdictions to be able to work in conjunction with the state. I do not feel as though it is appropriate for the state to designate what statewide equity means. Local communities know what communities, what individuals have been harmed. You can look across the various jurisdictions. Folks have different criteria because law enforcement worked in different ways in various communities. We would support the state moving forward with fee deferrals or fee waivers for social equity applicants that were identified at the local level.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up.
I'm Margot Feinberg. I'm here on behalf of the UFCW, and we have been actively involved in pushing forward a social equity plan in Los Angeles and in other places in the state. We believe that that there should be resources allocated to creating local models. Not every city like Los Angeles has the resources to develop these models, and the state should be involved in helping them do that. They should be helping having this conversation, because just having this conversation helps move us forward. I believe there should be we believe there should be a modified fee structure. There should be all of the leverage funding, but also I think there's an idea of having incentive for shelf space, so even if you don't have your own entity, that you could have places within companies to work with social equity partners. And of course, from our perspective, you have to also look at the workers, and you have to find a way to provide jobs and job training for people who've been impacted by the war on drugs, because not everyone's going to be an owner, and we have to make sure. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, next up.
I'm Malachi Amen, president of the California Urban Partnership. I also represent the Network for Racial and Health Equity and Marijuana Policy. And one of the things that we've dealt with over the past year is the fact that equity, from a local agenda to a state agenda, has always been the last thing on the agenda, and it's time to stop. Yeah. It's time to stop. We know the lights are going out. Every time we get here, the lights go out, right? And so,
hang on a second. It's just horrible. Somebody leaned up against something. Hold on. Let's make sure we're addressing this properly. All right, please continue.
It will take 235 years from now for the average black and brown family's wealth to catch up with the average white family's wealth. You may not want to talk about slavery. You may not want to talk about Jim Crow. But we have to talk about what this industry can do to repair that and repair the war on drugs, particularly the war on marijuana. 70%, depending on where you look, of marijuana-related arrests have been black people. Okay? So let's not start humming and humming now. The state of California has an opportunity to take the best of equity programs around the state and declare that those cities and counties with an equity program will be priority in terms of a state license. And in terms of a fee waiver, that's the only thing that we should be talking about, because we paid enough.
Thank you. All right, next up.
Hello, my name is Joshua Jenkins. I'm with Lowell Penguin Incorporated. Once again, our mission at Lowell Penguin is to improve the lives of American veterans. I only request that while going through the equity treatment, veterans, minority veterans specifically, have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs, and they continue to be disproportionately affected. Veterans are already afforded equity treatment per law, and this was brought up in another subcommittee that's not going to be addressed today. But under Business Professions Code, Section 16102, veterans already are afforded that equity to not pay the startup license and permitting costs. But that was obviously overlooked during the emergency regulations being drafted. 115.4 in the expedited application processing was allowed, but 16102 was not. And now that AB 1159 is passed, the use of 16-100 to hide behind to say that veterans aren't entitled, that equity treatment they're already afforded by law, is a disservice to that community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up.
I am Sarah Armstrong. In addition to my duties at Americans for Safe Access, I am the policy chair for the Southern California Coalition, the first advocacy organization after the CMA to put a social equity plank in our program. We would ask that the state of California work with us and grant to our local equity programs the same privileges, the same respect, and the same cooperation that we have shown you. If we offer fee waivers at the local level, please mirror them at the state level. If we have other things that we need help with, we ask that you mirror our rules rather than imposing your rules upon us. We are working very hard under the leadership of Kat Packer to put forward one of the most cutting-edge social equity programs in the country. We need our state legislature and our bureau to work with us and help us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next, okay, great, thank you.
Hi. I urge the committee to really push this on a state level to include race, because we'd be lying to ourselves that there hasn't been institutional racism with cannabis attached. So that needs to come down from the top down, because there's still communities where the political power doesn't reflect the community. Where I come from, it is predominantly white people in power. So why would they want to empower brown people to have, you know, I'm not going to go down that route, but it's going to be very difficult to, you know, to gain the correct equity program, because if you look at statistics as far as arrests in those areas, the brown, black people in those areas were arrested way more. So I urge that you consider race in this from a state level, because they did when they first created prohibition. You know, it was a target against blacks and Latinos and the reefer madness and all that. That's where it started, all, you know, up until now. So, yeah, that's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Victoria, and I have a comment. I'm here to speak in favor of including gender equity into the social equity program, as it's just as important. The current social equity program in Los Angeles says nothing about women, but addresses minorities and low-income neighborhoods. Right now, women make up half our country, yet only 5% of CEOs. In the Forbes 500 of CEOs, there's only 32 women-owned businesses. Cannabis is the industry that's going to lead the way for women to regain their economic power and their fair place in making history. For centuries, women were deprived of business opportunities and business education and their ability to vote in just less than 100 years ago. I'm not black or Hispanic, but I am an immigrant, and I am low income, but I still don't qualify because I'm not the type of minority they specified, and I still live in a safe area. Sacramento has included women in their social equity program, and so does Pennsylvania. So they are being recognized, but Los Angeles does not. So women are mothers, and they are the ones who have children, and the very plant we're talking about is all female.
Thank you.
Lynn Silver, Public Health Institute. The biggest cause of negative health effects of cannabis was decades of unjust incarceration. We have a historic duty to mitigate that in our public policy. The Bureau of Cannabis Control is seeking ways to treat with love and efficiency the needs of cultivators, manufacturers, and retailers. They need to give the same love and attention and care to the issues of equity and social justice and keeping the benefits of the cannabis industry, to the extent that they exist, on the wrong side of the tracks and not just going to rich investors.
Thank you. All right, next up.
Hi there again. My name's Alex Shadani, and on this matter, I'm representing Dragon Industries, who owns 2 buildings. And one of those buildings, we would like to get involved in the social equity program. We want to work in the social equity program. We support the social equity program. And we would like to support recommendation 5 of moving forward to leasing out part of our building to one of these social equity programs. So I just wanted to state that we are in support of this, and we want to move forward in any way that we can to support the social equity program from a building owner's perspective.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Yeah, hi, Adam Villarreal, also from Dragon Industries. I just wanted to second that comment there's a whole lot of people who are in strong support of the social equity program, And if they had more resources available to them, then I think you'd start to see more implementation of those programs. I don't think it's an issue so much that people aren't willing to participate in the programs, is that the framework isn't necessarily there. Like our organization is definitely willing and ready to do so. We just want to reach out and with our other contemporaries reach out and let people know that we are.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Greg McGarrian. When I look through all of these, and there's only one little area in number 6 where I see a mention of veterans, and that's during the data collection. And social equity has affected certain geographic locations more than others and certain communities. But in one area, in one instance, it's affected us all the same. And in the Marine Corps, we had a saying, we only have 2 colors, green and dark green. That was it. The rest were they're all brothers and sisters. And in the military, as veterans, one place that we have suffered, especially through pharmaceutical drugs and high suicide, is the veterans. Regardless, so when you're considering any type of social equity program, you cannot leave out the veterans because all of the suicide rates is all from alcohol and pharmaceutical drugs that we get pumped up by, and it's all legal. So always consider the veterans when you're thinking about this, because that's one area where they're dying every day due to the drugs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Yes. Roz McCarthy again with Minorities for Medical Marijuana. We're a national organization, and we're here on behalf of BayPAC Sacramento, the California Black Chamber of Commerce, and the California Black Chamber Foundation. One thing I want to make sure is real crystal clear. There's a difference between social equity and a diversity program or diversity planning. And what we're talking about is the social equity piece that can be managed at a local level in regards to who those equity participants are. I will tell you in Oakland, we actually wrote applications for 4 different equity applicants. Out of the dispensaries that were offered permits in Oakland, it was 4. You know, there's 2,756 dispensaries in the state of California. So you get 4 out of Oakland this first round who get a permit. Whereas if you talk about diversity planning and make it a requirement and make it something so that if you get a license, you have to produce a diversity plan. I wrote the legislation in Florida. They have a diversity plan requirement, as well as in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Think about, there are 2 separate things. If you look on here, this is a document everyone has. I've spelled it all out for you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Timothy Island from Green Stop. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO. And I'm actually going to piggyback a little bit off what she said. Is what I represent is 1, minorities, and 2, companies that don't touch the plant and don't have a desire to touch the plant. And when we talk about these social equity programs, I really don't hear much for companies that are adjacent, that are going to be a staple in the industry, that bring excellence to the industry. So I really want to make sure that when it's a consideration that we really think about companies that don't touch the plant. And how they still will be a staple. For example, Green Stop, we're a hardware software solution that's going to bring great benefits to dispensary owners in the retail space. And I just want to make sure that we're not left out and we don't get representation as a company that will be a huge impact in the industry and bring benefits to the industry just because we don't touch the plant. So I just want to make sure that companies do not get left out that are adjacent. That will still be staples in the industry. So I just suggest that you guys come with a plan for diversity for the suppliers. Also connecting communities, because like we said, I'm only hearing 5 cities out there that are potentially taking the social equity program. We got to connect everybody in the state. So a plan for that.
Move on to the next speaker.
And a plan for the workforce and career development.
Next
Thank
speaker,
you.
Please.
Hi. Oh, I'm sorry.
You know what? It's getting really hard to hear what's going on. We've got a lot of sidebar conversations. If we could just stay focused for a little bit longer, that'd be awesome. All right, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Myra Delgado. I'm with the working group. Historically, it seems like everybody's aware that it's after the brown and the black. One of the things that we're not discussing, however, is our immigration community. I currently live in a community where we are over 52% residents. We have no citizenship status, and we want to participate in this industry. And nobody's addressing that. What's happening in our communities is our families are being torn apart with deportation just because we're after some medicine, and that's not fair. We also have business owners that are trying to participate, have been arrested in the past, and are now facing possible deportation and cannot participate. So at the very least, I would like for that to be considered while we're putting together the social equity program. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi. I just want to make sure as we talk about social equity that it covers every aspect of the cannabis industry. As I've read, it was just on the retail side, but I want to make sure it covers the retail, manufacturing, as well as cultivation. I want to say that people of African American communities are very passionate and have the skill sets to cultivate at a high level if given the opportunity. So we definitely want to push this forward and make sure everybody gets a chance for the consumers, because I know some black dudes that can grow some really good cannabis and need a shot. So.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Yes, Cherie Franklin, Think and Grow Lab. We're creating an incubator here in Los Angeles, and we support your efforts to provide programs. As a person who grew up here in University Gardens on Vermont and Jefferson and attended Manual Arts High School, I could tell you that the war on drugs ruined our entire community, my family, and truly impacted everyone in my high school. But I'm here as I call myself a spook sitting by the door, because I have to make sure that we're bringing resources to the table. I sit on one of your state loan committees, and the state offers loan guarantee program through your Small Business Development Corporation. I would encourage you to reach out to your other agencies at the state who give loans. I've sat on a program when Arnold Schwarzenegger was there to fund a program to fund solar energy. You can do the same thing through these other departments, and you can offer loan guarantees and loans through existing agencies at the state level.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Ryan Miller of Operation EVAC. I'm from the Oakland Bay Area, which is the birthplace of equity. I love it. I love the supernova women who essentially wrote equity. Shout out Sunshine back there. And what I hope, I love equity as a pathway to justice. And what I'm inviting you to consider today is let's create a superhighway to justice. Let's create a parallel system identical to equity for military veterans. Why? Because the school to prison pipeline and the military to prison pipeline intersect in the same low-income communities. The military industrial complex and the prison industrial complex intersect in the same low-income communities. For those of us, perhaps due to privilege, who avoid prison, we're forced to violent servitude to clamber toward upward social mobility. So I'd like to gain your support on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to provide a call for clarity in regards towards acknowledging the disenfranchisement that has happened throughout the years. It's happened on a number of different levels, but what I feel as though equity would acknowledge is the, pardon my adjective, weed warriors who knew the risks, but generally went out of their way to cater to patients, to cater to compassionate use, who aren't here to advocate for certain things. And let's just not lose sight that we stand on those people's shoulders, the people who went out of their way to continue to provide a medicine that they knew was illegal. Have a good day.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yes, again, I'm Barbara McGee, and I'm with LA Miracle Cure. We're a podcast on iHeartRadio. Now, I'm from Oakland, California. I fled Oakland because of the injustice that has been done in Oakland to black and brown people. I'm one of the few people in this room that hold dual citizenship. I am Creek Nation, and I have a card for that. Now, when we talk about who has been treated the worst, I think Native Americans have been annihilated, literally. There are just a few of us that are able and capable to do business. As an African American, from my other side of my family, let me tell you something, a little story about a man named Dr. Armand Tillett. Dr. Armand Tillett was a friend to the community. He started in Los Angeles, and you know what he did? He set up collectives to help people in the area of Crenshaw. And you know what they did for him? They put him in federal prison. I encourage you to look up the story of Armand Tillett and then decide.
Thanks so much. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Marcella McSorley. I am in the space of analytical chemistry and microbiology, and I will be building a laboratory to test cannabis.
So we're on equity right now.
Fair enough.
We've already covered
That's
testing
okay.
labs.
I just simply wanted to say thank you for letting us have this space, and perhaps I'm in the wrong
Okay,
spot.
thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is James Edwards. I'm the co-founder of Green Stop Technologies. We're an ancillary company. We are hands off the plant. But I want to take a second just to look at all the empty seats, one around the advisory board and two inside the entire seating. I want to make a recommendation that if this does get brought up at another meeting, it can start with social equity instead of ending with it, because everybody feels rushed, and I understand everybody has a long traveling. You guys all came from long places away. I know a lot of people that are a part of this board do care about social equity, and I recommend we start with it next time, because that's why we're talking about social equity, because people of color have been left out of a lot of things. We're always the last to get an opportunity at the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair, that concludes public comment on equity.
Mr. Sweeney.
Yes, I think that there is a motion on the floor. I think there is a second, and I think we just happen to have a quorum. And so I move the previous question.
All right, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Baboulian.
Aye.
Cermak. Oh, I'm sorry. Farrow.
Aye.
Heidelbach Terremoto.
Aye.
Harada.
Aye.
Nevedal.
Aye.
Heck.
Aye.
Ron.
Aye.
Stevenson.
Aye.
Sweeney.
No.
Woolsey.
Aye.
Wu. You.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Mr. President,
Oh, I'm not the president. I'll just take the chair.
the chair, Mr. Chair.
Slow down.
You say slow down. I just also want to let you know that I specifically associate with the document that you have, minorities for medical marijuana. And I just want you to know, I want everyone to know you've had this passed out before you, that I associate with all those remarks. And am pleased that we have national leaders who are weighing in on this subject because they realize how important it is.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney.
Such as Roz McCarthy. Yes, thank you.
All right. Okay, so we have a couple other items left to address. We are unfortunately going to run out of time here, or we're already past time. We have item 8, 9, and 10 that we're going to have to continue on to our next meeting. And that would be for licensing, manufacture, and microbusiness. We have two other items left to address. One of those was related to A&M. And Mr. Baboulian, I believe that was your cause earlier. If you could perhaps, we didn't have any other items that seemed that got pulled from the legislative side. So if you could make a recommendation for the committee.
So to refresh the recommendation from earlier, the recommendation is to, I forgot. So with the M&A designation, to have the committee prepare a report to go to the legislature on behalf of the committee, stressing the importance of the recommendation, considering timing of licensing, cultivation, the legislative process, and all that.
Okay.
I have a question about
Yes.
what we're working on right now. So it's my understanding that earlier we were talking about how the statutory recommendations that were voted on today may or may not be moved forward to legislature as a recommendation from this full committee. And I'm a little concerned, and probably mostly confused about, are we
I please
just proposing that for A&M?
Can I get people to just stop
Or
with the
are we-
sidebars?
Or are we proposing that the the statutory recommendations passed today all be bundled into a document that can be moved from the committee to legislature?
Well, the conversation earlier was just that there were the potential for a handful of specific items that started with the A&M issue. And if those elevated to the level that conversation did, that they would be bundled together. However, although we may have passed some other legislative, we didn't have that conversation about bundling the rest of those.
Well, I would be remiss to not want to include the transportation issues that cultivators are facing. I mean, it's a primary issue for them. So A&M, I would say that if we were going to do this, we'd want to look at A&M. We'd want to look at the compassion issues that are statutory. We'd want to look at the transportation issues that are statutory that we passed as a committee. I wouldn't necessarily feel great about just taking one of what we worked on today and moving that forward.
Okay, Mr. Baboyan?
Considering that, earlier the conversation was on the M&A designation, and between the committee comments, the public comments, and considering that cultivators would have to plant their crops, and considering that the next committee hearing was going to be in May, it was pushed back to revisit it at the end of this conversation and make a recommendation prior to the May meeting to send up to the legislature. If you guys feel like you want to lump a couple of other topics together, I'm okay with that.
I'm sorry, I lost you at the end there. What?
I said I'd be open to that.
Okay.
So I think what we would need is a clear motion on the floor to ask the committee to consider the statutory recommendations made today be put into a document that can be carried forward to legislature.
See, on that, the only thing I would say is the other topics didn't get enough discussion, the same way the M&A got discussed. So it would really be limited to the M&A to make that recommendation to the legislative body because of timing issues prior to the May meeting. If the general consensus is to lump them together and make a blanket recommendation on all things statutory, I don't think we discussed enough of the other statutory recommendations to be able to make that vote.
I think compassion would fall in there and transportation would fall in there. I feel like those were heavily discussed.
You know, one of the things I was going to try to bring up during the planning piece really kind of ties into a lot of this. There's some discussions today about there's going to be some legislation that may have already been introduced. Some of that may be already addressing what we're going to talk about here. A lot of stuff like Avis mentioned wasn't discussed fully, and we don't have we're barely at a quorum. I was going to ask the staff to come back at the next meeting prepared to give us an overview of what legislation that's pending, so we can make a decision whether we want to support if amended, oppose if amended, be silent, or make our own comments back. Because a lot of this stuff is going to be moving, and it may already be moving. You know, stuff on health and safety is going, all that stuff.
So I just want to say, Avis, I will not block your suggestion. I just want to really point out that there are other issues that I feel are equally important, that I feel the audience has also expressed significant importance to their stakeholder and their ability to operate.
Should we consider adding a meeting in April if our next meeting is in May so that we can address these and have more time?
Please.
Yep.
If that requires a motion, I'll make a motion to add an additional meeting. What are we, March, April?
In April?
Prior to the May meeting.
I'll second that.
Well, I'd like to state that we should keep in mind of events that take place in April, and that we not schedule anything around the big day in April.
420.
Right. Well, or maybe we do. But You know, but more than that, I think if we're going to run into a bit of a challenge because the staff need and the Bureau needs time to be able to find a venue, be able to put the contracts in place and so forth, to be able to schedule something like this. And if we're, you know, this far out, I mean, we gave them plenty of lead time when we were doing the subcommittees and pushed out, you know, additional meetings. We're not giving them that same opportunity to find the venue and be able to go through the public notice process and all that. So we'd have to be a little bit careful. My recommendation would be just to ask that the staff come back to us, you know, very quickly with what the feasibility is on doing an April meeting. And then don't forget, we also have to poll. We all know what the dates are on our own calendars for future meetings, but we have to poll the membership, because if we get put in a position where the bulk of the members are, you know, unable to attend, we can't reach a quorum, then we're not doing anybody any service.
For the month of April, do we have a subcommittee meeting? And if, okay, so we're pretty much open for an emergency meeting.
Could we request that staff put together a doodle poll for possible dates that are in the last week of April? And would that give enough lead time for?
You know, I think what you might consider, and you know, the chair does have the ability to set meetings and set agendas. Maybe recommend that the chair work with Bureau staff to see if it's possible to set a meeting prior to the May meeting. There's a lot of factors we'd have to consider, quorum being one, and then of course, you know, the contract process, as well as other things that are already planned. But that way, it would probably be the most efficient way of doing that, because if you put too many parameters here now, if we can't find the right place or can't do that week, then you're going to limit the possibilities. So that's an idea.
Would we need to put that into a motion?
Yes.
I propose the chair work with.
Actually, I don't think so, because I believe under the duties of the chair and the vice chair already, that they have the ability to set meetings and to work on agendas with staff.
Oh, Tamara's not here. So why don't we just go ahead and do that? I'll reach out to the vice chair, and we'll make sure we connect with staff tomorrow if we can, and have this conversation and move this thing forward as quickly and efficiently as possible.
I appreciate that. Before Mr. Nikita left, he left me a little list of items. Do I need to read those out loud? It's suggestions for future meetings, or can I hand
I'm
them
sorry.
off?
Who's that from?
Joe Nikita?
We may not be, I mean, look, I think based on what we've done today and what we have on our, the next meeting is already full. So, you know, we can talk about future agenda items, but let's do it at the next meeting, because we're just, I mean, we've already got a full meeting next time.
Can I pass these off to you so you have them?
Yes, please. Okay, so getting back to where we started out here, is it the consensus here then to go ahead and all those items that were listed under legislative be put into a single letter that's developed as recommendations?
No, I think the consensus was to have you work with the Bureau staff on future agenda items at the next one. What was it? Future date.
So we don't need to. Okay, so let's do that then. So pending, so then we can table that, because we don't need to make a motion for that. Okay, fair enough.
Was there a motion pending on the legislative piece?
No, I think so you're pulling the original for M&A and.
Yes, I'm pulling the original for the M&A with the understanding that Chair is going to be working with Bureau staff prior to the next meeting to address it. I would ask that if, because of time limitations or whatever limitations, and it's not handled prior to the next meeting, that we do add it to the agenda item at the next meeting.
Okay, so then one remaining item was, if we go back to Subcommittee on Public Health and Youth, item number 7, recommendation on compassionate care program. The wording of the recommendation was, full advisory committee should recommend to seek a legislative fix for the compassionate care program. That would go through the chair's, you know, sort of helping, working to create that letter. I'd like to be able to put that into the same lump of other issues and be able to craft that all at one time.
Got it. No, that's perfectly fine.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so those were the last of the sort of housekeeping items. It looks like we have number 14. At this point, do we have any public comments on items not on the agenda? And if you wouldn't mind lining up and go through this one more time.
All right, go ahead.
Good evening, Susan Tibbin. Like many of you, we got up at 3 in the morning to get down here. We are extremely distressed that microbusiness doesn't seem to be of immediate concern. Please keep in mind that the season starts now with seeds, and we respectfully ask you to please review our document about microbusiness and please fit this in a timely manner, because without value added, all of those hundreds of people at Gavin Newsom's meeting in Garberville, the Blue Ribbon Commission, not one of those farmers, first, second, third, and fourth generation, was here today. Not one, except Paul and myself, because they are all but given up. Please address microbusiness in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, I just wanted to put this on record that I would recommend that the committee either form a subcommittee or take it on as a whole to discuss the event license. There are regulatory and statutory issues with the event organizer license. It's nowhere in the agenda right now. I'm hoping we can see that coming up here in the future, because it's a lot of the pieces of the other agenda items crisscross over into events, and there's obviously a few large items that need to be dealt with. So I just want to put that on record. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Yeah, hi. I want to touch on the immigrant community that has been left out. Again, just there needs to be some type of legislature or something written to help protect people that are in this country legally, that want to medicate, that want to participate in this booming industry. This is a way to help, take communities to a whole nother level, take back control, or at least share the control. So, yeah, keep in mind that there is nothing that protects legal residents from deportation in California right now, protecting them from the federal level. So please keep that take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I'm not aware if shared facilities are still under consideration, but if so, the use of extraction equipment using non-volatile and volatile forms of extraction shared facilities should be able to use those extraction forms of extraction, and it also would cater towards, sorry, it's been a long day. It would cater towards the equity applicants in Oakland, Sacramento, San Francisco, and Los Angeles to prevent red tape from letting equity applicants be able to enter into that market. Have a good day.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Yes, I would just like to second what Jackie had said earlier about events. As some of you know, the Emerald Cup, we've been at all of these meetings, and we're always relegated to the end for public comment. And, with the small farmer and the community, especially up north, the Emerald Cup and events like it are very important. And in some cases, it's their whole livelihood. So please, please, make room for events. We're spending a lot of money and time to be here, and we would really appreciate your time and consideration. Please, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Betsy Kabacher, and before regulations came into effect at all, I had a pastry company called the Kabakery that then turned into Kabaked. Kabaked is what I made it with the intention of infusing products, which I did at the time, and then I realized that there was no way I was going to be able to figure out all of this that we're doing right now on my own. So I've since started working for multiple brands in the space, including 2 craft edible companies and a delivery service, all in the Bay Area, with the intention of launching my own brand. I've spoken to Lori Ajax before, and she said that it's going to take a few years for my initial concept to be able to come to fruition based on the current regulatory climate. So I've sort of pivoted into a new product. But even so, the whole point of this is that you have to kind of take into consideration the craft industry as a whole, as well as individual entrepreneurs who are trying to enter the space. The burdens are really intense.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, welcome. I'll be brief.
I know this is all about regulation, but can you consider using your resources to organize a job fair along the way too? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker?
Hi, my name is Matthew, and I'm representing Somatic. And I just came out to talk about that it's a really high burden to have edible makers and topical makers be testing their final batch product rather than testing their concentrate or cannabis at highest concentration. That way we can look for pesticides and microbacteria, any of the normal things, and we're not checking our ingredients, and we can go through normal FDA standards or just parity the standards that the FDA does to make sure that we are producing safe, edible, or topical uses, and then making sure that it's not an undue burden to get all of these tested, because it may just be a wall that smaller craft makers can't actually get there because they'll have to produce such large batches.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker?
Hi, Paul Hansberry, Lovingly and Legally. I left a document that's entitled Microbusiness, but in that there's a number of different things because microbusiness encompasses all the different activities. In that there's a number of things that we weren't able to get to at the subcommittee, but touches on different activities, not the least of which would be for medicine makers, for them to be able to have batches that would be tested that they could draw from. If they're making an individual, say a suppository for a small child, that they wouldn't, that's the finished product. They could draw from pre-tested batches, just like a bartender at a bar, you give him, you can put an 18-year-old, he can mix them any way that he wants, but they've all been tested and taxed, so that they could, and then they wouldn't have to go through the compliance testing. It's just going to be $1,400 for a pack of suppositories. There's other things in there that I would like to have addressed at the next meeting, and I wish the next meeting could be next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker?
Hi, Timothy Island again, co-founder of Green Stop. Just wanted to elaborate from my last time, felt a little rushed, and I want to articulate a few more things. So I want to talk about diversity, and I really think that it'd be critical that we consider diversity for this industry. Every company on the planet has a diversity program, a plan, and I just want to make sure people from diverse backgrounds have representation. And I feel like I can't articulate enough that there's going to be companies out here that bring excellence, that are going to be people that are entrepreneurs, will be minorities, and this excellence will drastically influence this industry. And I just want to make sure that we have some type of plan for diversity, as far as a plan for suppliers for the industry, a plan for connecting different communities that may not be under the umbrella somehow at a state level. It could put everybody under the same umbrella, and then just a diversity plan for like workforce, career development. So I just want to re-articulate again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker?
I really just wanted to thank all of you guys. I've been here for 8 hours, and you guys have to keep doing this over and over. And everybody's here for their own personal, voice that they need to say, but you're here to kind of listen to us and help us. So that takes a lot of energy and brain power. So thank you so much. Also, just one quick thing. I'm probably not even going to be in this industry because I tried to do it mainly on my own and get kosher investments. But I've been manufacturing topicals, and I've been looking at the zoning map, which has no street names or anything for LA, and there's like no places that are under 500 square feet or 1,000 square feet. Most of the areas are like huge industrial areas. But for a small business that needs a small kitchen to make topicals or something like that, there isn't many places that are in your zoning map that actually have those spots. So maybe just to look into that and see about zoning for smaller businesses. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker?
Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm from Somatic, a small vegan edible company. Testing facilities are estimating the cost of full compliance testing between $900 and $1,000. If we are required to test every single batch, the minimum profitable batch size will have to be so large that it will require considerable capital investment in each and every batch. The amount of testing needed to support the industry will be so great that there will be considerable lag times between when the distributor receives the product and when the manufacturer receives payment, which will further tie up capital for small businesses, essentially requiring new small businesses to create large batches in order to amortize testing expenses, which will create huge overhead expenses and tied up capital and storage needs. Burdening the cost of goods of consumer packaged goods with such high testing costs will make cannabis products less accessible. If we are serious about the success of the equity program, we don't see how we can burden the launch costs of small businesses so heavily with a testing requirement that doesn't actually provide greater safety to public health than other burdensome options such as the FDA.
Thank you. Next speaker.
How's it going? My name is Joshua Jenkins with Loyal Penguin Incorporated. Once again, the mission of Loyal Penguin is to improve the lives of American veterans. Earlier, I was discussing Business and Professions Code, Section 16102. It's been in some form since 1901. 1941 was the last amendment to that, and it specifically states that outside of sales of alcohol, sales of a good owned by a veteran-owned business does not have to pay the permits and the licensure fees associated with a typical startup of a business. This is already on the books. This is already statutory equity treatment that has been afforded to veterans, but it's not being afforded by the Bureau of Cannabis Control. We brought attention to this, and we were ignored for over a month and a half. That is unacceptable treatment of American veterans and veteran-owned businesses such as my own. I served 10 years over there fighting for your rights, not to come back here to fight for mine. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Real quick, not to add to your agenda, I just want to say thank you first off to each and every one of you here. I myself have been here since this morning as well. I know how hard it is. With all these great recommendations, some good and some bad, just please don't forget the veteran. We're the reason we're sitting in this room today. We fought for that right. Have the same compassion. Be willing to lay your life on the line or your job on the line to protect us. Don't forget us in this at all. Just please don't. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair. That closes the public comment.
Okay, well, I think we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and we will be in touch with the members shortly on potential dates and scheduling for a April meeting. Thank you all so much for your work. Thank you all for your patience and participation today.
Motion to adjourn.